Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Leadership Greater Washington Frontline Conversation. We're thrilled to have Kathy Hollinger with us. I want to thank PNC Bank for being a sponsor of these conversations. They've got a great relationship with us at Leadership Greater Washington. Very thankful for their support in our partnership over the years. So PNC, thank you for enabling us to do this. And I also want to mention some upcoming Frontline Conversations. We've got one on December 11th with Tanae Dolphin, who's the Executive Director of the Greater Washington Black Chamber of Commerce. And we have one with Doug Dameron on December 16th. And we're going to be talking about coming back to the office, what you need to look out for, what things you need to be aware of in terms of your lease arrangements, things like that, or changes that you might be able to make. And then we have Michaela Perrone doing a Leadership Day webinar on December 9th and giving us advice on the practice of successful consulting. And if you want to start a consulting business, or if you have one, you want to make it better, please tune into that. So I'm very excited about those three upcoming events. Kathy, I want to thank you for being with us. You were our first Frontline Conversation, and now you're our first repeat Frontline Conversation. So it's great to see you. Great to have you with us. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Doug, and good morning, everyone. So happy to be here with you.
So how are you feeling? How's your family? How's the health? How's your staff's health? How's all that going?
So everybody, thankfully, is well, as positive as we can be. Came off of a restful holiday. Everybody is healthy. So things on the family front are good. My team is working furiously, but they are all healthy and at home working remotely.
Yeah, I got some bad news recently. My brother's family up in Rhode Island all got it. They all got through it. My sister and her family in Florida all got it. And she's just sort of getting over it right now. So it's a scary time for everybody, I think. I mean, it is worse than it's ever been in this country. And that kind of, it leads me to ask you about your industry. And again, we wanted to have you on as our first conversation because of the impact to the restaurant industry, the numbers of people being laid off or not working, and the impact to all of the restaurants throughout the region. Now we're entering a winter that's going to be, seems to be, it's going to be very kind of dark for our country. And where are we now? How do we compare to where we were when we started this? And what are some of the things that you're doing or the industry's doing to help us get through the winter till we can all get vaccinated and things get back to normal next year? We hope. Yeah,
so, I think when we talked last, months and months and months ago, just to do a quick look back, we were at the start of the pandemic. We had 40% of our restaurants across the region, they decided to completely close. And when I say completely close, it was to be able to pause and figure out what they were going to do as they figure out this what we thought was a temporary new normal. At that same time, restaurants had to furlough or let go 92% of their staff, which was huge. And the average decrease in sales back then was 70%. They were operating on very, very, very little revenue coming in. They had a skeletal staff, and they were really only doing takeout and delivery. In the summer, we saw a bit of an uptick, slight uptick. Half of our surveyed operators across the region saw a slight uptick. Now here we are in the fall, and the biggest challenge, and I think we're still fall, correct? We're not winter officially yet.
That's right. That's right. A few more weeks.
We saw that maybe operators brought back 20% of their staff. So it's still very, very modest. They're still working with very few people on their team. Again, outdoor dining was a bit of a boost. There was a lot of energy, momentum around streeteries and tenting and how to have this dining experience outside where people felt very safe. Today, what we're hearing from our operators is that the tenting is becoming challenging. Heating is very challenging. Finding heaters is even more challenging. And Consumer confidence is the biggest challenge for all operators right now. Those who feel comfortable dining inside versus dining outside. You add on the winter, and it becomes a real challenge for our folks. So now we're in a place going into winter where the majority of restaurants are looking at some kind of hibernation model. And this is separate from rollback that is happening across the region. This is restaurants deciding on their own that they may go back to a March or April model, only do takeout and delivery. They may try to mitigate the loss of those costs by scaling back, taking away indoor dining, even at 25%, which does very little for them. And it's going to be a very tough couple months.
So if I remember correctly, when we started, I think it was about 90,000+ people who were out of work in your industry.
Yes.
And you said some of them have been brought back, but now that if they go back to the delivery takeout, does that mean there'll be layoffs again and we'll go back to a small number?
I would imagine that there will be, which is really, why the federal relief is so incredibly important, because the region has been pretty great about offering whatever kind of relief they can in the city, in Northern Virginia, in Maryland, small business grants, restaurant focused relief. But again, as I said 8 months ago, that is whole patch relief approach. We need the larger stimulus and relief coming from the federal government so that if in fact these restaurants are choosing to shut it down for a couple months, they're doing it with some level of hope and promise to be able to build back better in the spring. We're pushing, we're working with our national partners. Really, the members on the Hill have to get out of each other's way. We just need this relief to be able to get through probably the darkest time and darkest months ahead.
We had a great conversation a little while ago with Bettina Stern from Chaya Tacos, and she gave a shout out to you this morning, but she also gave a shout out to you during the conversation about how great you are in terms of letting your members know what's going on, getting information to them, trying to help them facilitate what they're doing. And she had a very interesting story because she was looking to expand her operations now. She took a real hit when the pandemic came, but is now looking at doing some pop-up locations around the region as a way to do that. And I just thought that was fascinating that this innovation that we're seeing, she's a great example of that, of people reacting to what's been happening.
No doubt. And, Bettina is a great example of what we've seen in terms of creativity and innovation really during the most difficult time. But we're seeing that, we're seeing that across the region, folks who are taking this opportunity to reset and create models that can sustain some of the up and down of what we have in the near future, but really some of the trending and consumer behavior that will last probably for years, if not a decade ahead. The challenge is capacity, but also it's mindset. It's how are you taking a very daunting situation and turning it into an opportunity to grow, to re-employ people, to provide a great service, provide a great experience, even if that experience is not happening on premise, but it's happening in your homes.
Yeah, I think one of, we always ask at the end of these sessions, what's a leadership lesson you've learned? And clearly innovation is one of the top ones that people talk about, being open to that, looking for it, trying to do things just to help survive and sometimes thrive in these cases. I went down to our offices for the first time since I left in March a couple of weeks ago. And we're downsizing the offices, we're shrinking our space. But what struck me was there was nobody on the streets, nobody walking around. And there's it's called Italian Gourmet Deli, sort of across the street from us. That's a great mom and pop. It's a husband and wife team that own it, run it, got great employees. And I just can't imagine what life has been like for them. I mean, they're open breakfast, lunch, early afternoon. and they are just screaming because there's no foot traffic for them down there. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you're hearing that across the board in your industry.
I mean, it's
heartbreaking.
I'm your business neighbor. It's heartbreaking. And I go downtown every couple days. I go into the office. First of all, my commute is about 3 minutes. So that's the only silver lining, is getting downtown has never been easier, but it is heartbreaking. I mean, neighborhoods are faring a bit better, but downtown is really suffering. I do hope now is not the time, but I do hope as we come through the winter and during the winter, we're really thinking about a program that incentivizes people to come back downtown the way that London did it and the way that Middleburg, Virginia has done it, to give people a reason to spend their dollars, spend it locally and spend it downtown. That's not to say that everybody doesn't need it, because everybody does need it. But our downtown corridor is a ghost town. And we have to figure something out. We have to put great minds together to figure out how we're really collaborating and supporting one another to get this industry back online, at least in a modestly positive way.
So I have a sister in London who took full advantage of, her and her family took full advantage of the incentives that London gave, or England gave, for restaurants. It was, she said it was a great, it wasn't a lot of money, but it really, it made them go out and do things and buy from restaurants and do things that they hadn't been doing on as frequent a basis. So I'd love to see, I'm with you, I'd love to see something like that happen in DC and happen in the region. That'd be beneficial for everyone. So
I would love to be able to connect with her on that.
So let's talk about some of the innovations that we've seen. One thing that this whole ghost kitchen trend is fascinating to me. Clyde's just announced they've got ghost kitchens. I think Bettina basically is turned her Chinatown location for chai tacos into her commissary to get food out to other locations. So talk to us about ghost kitchens. What does that mean? And what do you think the future of that is?
Yeah, I think that, I think it's been, again, it's a great example of the innovation that we're seeing with our local industry. And we're seeing this trend across the country. But it really is the ability to be able to use existing space in a way that is generating a completely different set of revenue coming in and meet a need that is going out to support people who want takeout or delivery. We're seeing more and more restaurants across the region do it. The challenge, if there is a challenge in this, there's always a challenge with everything, but it is really the idea of having kind of your staff A, staff B, having the infrastructure internally to be able to really execute. I think right now, the biggest impediment is that small businesses are not able to hire back in a way that can support them to increase their services out to residents and to the community at large. So for those who have figured out a way to create that system where they're also able to generate revenue coming in, I think it's fantastic. I think we're going to see so much more of this. We're seeing a lot of, the holiday at home campaign, which, we're going to be pushing out aggressively. But as you're going into the holidays, how can you have the same food experience supporting all these great restaurants, but you have it at home? And again, that's going to go back to, as we roll back, as restaurants choose to roll back, they're going to this March, April model to be able to offer services in a somewhat unique way, but also in a way that doesn't tax them, where they have to buy the same amount of food product, buy the same amount of beverage product, because you need a team, you need volume, you need the interest and support to be able to make sure that that financial model internally works. I think it's terrific what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of it in the old food halls where you had various concepts that were in one structure. They are turning their entire operation into ghost kitchens to be able to push out some really interesting creative menu options for diners.
And we're seeing groups like Chipotle announcing their new restaurants are just going to be really electronic. I mean, you won't be able to sit and eat in there. It'll just be you order online, pick it up, and you're good to go. So we're having
That's right.
So that's really quite a change, you know. And to me, it does this whole thing of building a community or creating community gathering spaces is going to be hurt quite a bit if we go too far that way. So, any other innovations you've seen that you think will carry on or that will be helpful? I mean, one I've noticed is the ability to take out drinks, cocktails, wine, beer from restaurants. The laws seem to be, the regulations have loosened up quite a bit. Yeah, but I think that's a nice change for people.
I think it's great. And I, candidly want it to be permanent. And I think consumer behavior is showing us that is what consumers want. They want the ability to be able to do all the things at their convenience on demand. So in the city in DC, we feel like that will become something that is for sure more permanent going forward. We're working on that in Virginia right now as they go into session. These are the low-hanging fruit relief that also speaks to the trending that we are seeing that will take us into reset and will change our industry. I talk a lot about we're going to look very different, and it's okay that we're going to look different as an industry, but what are some of the bright spots from this pandemic that we can carry forward? I think an initiative like Alcohol to Go is a perfect example of that, where in contrast, caps on third-party delivery like DoorDash, Grubhub, Postmates, that's a little bit more challenging. We're not trying to create, anything that paralyzes one business model to benefit ours as an industry. But that is an area, as we know, more and more people may opt to eat at home before they go back fully to dine in restaurants. We have to find a way where the numbers work for the restaurant owners and operators. Like they can't have 30 to 40% going out the door while they're hustling to put together these beautiful packages of food to go. So that in contrast is something that not sure that it would be permanent going forward, but at a minimum going into the winter months and probably the first phases of recovery, we need to keep certain things like that in place in order for this industry to be able to come back in some way.
What about, you mentioned it before, the streeteries. I think that's it's been wonderful to see streets being taken over by restaurants, by people walking around, sitting, eating, enjoying a drink. I know New York's done a lot of that. We have here in Bethesda, DC, other places have done that. Any word on whether that will continue or whether they're going to reopen the streets and get us back to the gridlock that we hate so much?
I think it will continue. I think that, listen, we've seen all over the world where other countries, other cities have really found a way to maximize outdoor space in a really creative way. And honestly, in the dead of winter, I remember in early February, a couple years ago, I was in Montreal. I think it was solidly -3 degrees the entire time I was there. Everybody was outside. It was a winter festival. People were dining outside. Yes, there were heaters, but there was somewhat of this winter warrior mentality of we want to still experience our life, and winter does not get in the way of that. I think we're going to see the Streeteries program continue. We're going to probably see it branch out across the region, where a lot of the allowances that were put in place now, they will continue probably through the end of summer 2022, to allow the small business community to possibly recoup some of the lost revenue from the year and a half prior. And I think that's so important. You're basically doubling up on your dining rooms at a time when people are back out and dining. So we think it's really important. The winter is going to be hard again for us here because our mindset is not one to be the winter warrior, be outside, dine outside, bundle up. But that's going to be more of a culture change, consumer behavior change that we hope people will adopt as we go into this winter ahead of us.
And far be it from me to try to give advice to Mayor Bowser or to the Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, but I thought what they did, taking a tour of one of the DC Christmas markets, was wonderful. Maybe they could also go to a streetery and just stop and have a light lunch or something and bring some attention to that. I think that'd be great for all of us. That'd be actually be very nice to see that happen. So
you should make that call.
Yeah. Like I said, far be it from me to give advice to elected officials. We've got a question from Carolyn Jepson. Do you find that the small restaurants in local neighborhoods are doing better because there's that loyalty built in from their neighbors? Are you seeing that effect?
We're definitely seeing that effect. The reality is that these restaurants have been the anchors of these neighborhoods. Like we see it across the region where residents are taking so much pride in helping and supporting their neighborhood small restaurants. So we have noticed that they are faring slightly better. They're livable, walkable communities. So it's easy to be able to really simply create a mission for yourself. I am leaving the house. I am going to pick up food. I'm going to support my local neighborhood restaurant, and I'm bringing it back to feed my family. So we're seeing a lot of that. And I hope, which I will make that plea at the end of this session, that everyone is finding their own unique way to support small businesses during the winter months.
So we've got a comment and a question from Bettina Stern with Chaya Tacos, and I don't mean to keep bringing her up, and because I'm not kissing up to her. I do think the world of her. I'm a big fan of hers, but she's got a great question that I think will lead to some discussion here about the cashless business bill in front of the DC Council, and is that something that your association supported? Before you answer that, let me just say, for the first reading from Bettina's question, for the first 3 years of their business, they worked against the cashless trend, but they had an issue with one of their employees and the taking of some money. So they removed cash handling from all of their locations. They couldn't afford that kind of loss. And what she did in that, she is concerned about the unbanked. They've gotten, she said, a very small number of angry customers over the years. But what Bettina does is she basically offers them free food, hopes they pay for it in the future if they only have cash. So what are your thoughts on that, and how's that going to impact your industry?
So it's interesting. We were really mindful when this came up a couple of years ago not to take a hard position. We were trying to be as open-minded as possible. We had heard concerns from both ends, those who were against cashless, those who were for it. I will say this, where we are today, my position has been, please don't do anything, elected officials, that require any kind of change to where we are right now. No additional burdens, no additional fees, no additional legislation that does not directly support our industry. Allow us to pause, be in place, get it together, because we're a second away from closing individually as a restaurant or as an industry in general. So I say that to also say that we have a lot of concerns. I mean, public safety is becoming an increasing concern for a lot of our small businesses in terms of presence, lack of presence, both, right? Over presence and lack of presence.
So
with the
explain that a little bit. What do you mean by overpresence? And lack of presence means you don't see police officers, I guess, around. What
yeah.
is overpresence?
So overpresence is, as we have others coming into our city, for example, for various protests or demonstrations, the overpresence is also quite intimidating for a diner's experience. And this was more so in the summer. But I say all that to say that it's such a tricky balancing act, because right now, I just want our small businesses to be in a position to be able to operate in a way where they feel they can operate modestly, they can operate safely, and they can protect their employees. So we're very concerned. We are expressing that concern, and the willingness to at least adjust, amend, revisit has been there by the elected officials, but I still think there's a little bit of not fully understanding what it means to pause. I don't think they know how to pause.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think there's this sort of mindset among a lot of the elected officials that they got to keep passing bills, keep increasing regulation, keep doing things, as opposed to just letting things sit for a while and play out and see how it works. So let's hope. We had a great Leadership Greater Washington Town Hall yesterday with a gentleman named Freddie Ravel, and one of his big points was the philosophy of STOP, S-T-O-P. The S is for stop, T is for taking a breath, O is for observing, and then P is for proceeding. So you pause, you stop, and you take some time, think about things, listen to things before you make a decision. And I think that could be very helpful to some of our elected officials. We've got a question from Doug Dameron that's going to involve elected officials if it happens. I think it's a great suggestion. And Doug says, how about making restaurant tabs a tax write-off for a year? That'd be a huge incentive to get people back to restaurants, or some version of that. What do you think about that? I think that sounds great, actually.
I think that's great. I think that is an absolutely great way to get people to dine out. And I think it should be flexible in terms of whether it's takeout or delivery, right? It doesn't have to be on premise. It's the idea that you are investing in the local economy and you can write that off. I think that's fantastic. I'm actually going to write that down.
I think, I guess on the federal side for business expenses, it's half of the cost now. But I think
yes,
if we did something for everybody, for any restaurant thing, just for a year, that would help the industry quite a bit.
Yeah.
Doug, that's a great suggestion. So Kathy, who would you go to in the various jurisdictions to talk to about that idea? I mean, who are people that are responsive to small business that you see? I don't want to put you in any trouble here.
No. In DC, I will say that, on both on the executive side and on the council side, and the mayor has been, she has been open, willing, and trying to find every possible way to support this industry. She loves this industry. She supports it personally. The CFO also, Jeff DeWitt, we do check-ins every couple weeks. We talk about revenue projections. We talk about what's really happening in the industry. And he would be probably very open to discussing not only that, but everything I've thrown at him. A loan program where restaurants, based on the taxes that they paid in a year, they can get that back. I mean, they have been very open. In Virginia, it's trickier. It would have to be statewide. I don't know that would be something that county by county they would be able to do, but it's possible. I will say that across the board, Doug, elected officials have been really, really open and willing to hear ideas, because the reality is that they don't know. And I don't know either. From the very beginning in March, it was, we've never done this before, any of us. how are we thinking about how we can get through the immediate moment? And how are we thinking about a month from now, 2 months from now, and recovery when we get to that point? And that is an ongoing conversation. Really, there's a willingness from both ends. And I hope that there would be a willingness across industries also. Rent relief is a big piece for our industry. We have to find a way where landlords and tenants are coming together to talk about how we're going to get through this period. This has to be a win-win. Like if we're losing, one can't win. If they're losing, we can't win. We have to figure out a way where we're all losing a piece, but we're taking steps forward to be able to address some of these bigger issues.
And the beauty of the tax write-off is that it doesn't require upfront money. I mean, the London issue of subsidizing restaurant bills required sort of upfront money. Here, the local government, state government, they don't have any money. I mean, they're really scrambling to make ends meet now because of the economic crisis. But the tax write-off wouldn't require that. It wouldn't require you to put cash in. It would come out after a year. I really like Doug Dameron. Thank you very much for that idea. I think it's a great idea. We've got another question about nonprofits, and they are working with marginalized populations. They've got workforce development programs, and they're specifically training people in the hospitality industry. But now there's no jobs to offer them upon certification. Do you have any recommendations, any thoughts for the nonprofits on that? What do they do when they're training people to become waiters, to train people to work in restaurants, and yet there's so many people laid off?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we, as an organization, we invested at least my 8 years in trying to really create the right workforce development programs that meet the needs of this industry. We spent a lot of time. We created some great programming in DC, in the state of Virginia, state of Maryland, to really help create this next generation of industry professionals on all levels, right? Front of the house, back of the house, management, ownership. We have to basically start over, because whatever was in place a year ago, that training is not going to be the training that is going to be required going forward. Everything is different. Everything is different with the person that is even rehired who has been furloughed or let go. What they are being rehired for today is going to be very different than what they were when they were hired for a year ago. So I think we look at it as an opportunity. I would recommend that any organization, any nonprofit organization that is in this space, in workforce education and training, to work with owners directly to talk and ask, what are the needs that you would expect as you are rehiring people back? And once that alignment is there, then it creates the tenets for the kind of training that is going to be needed as this industry resets going forward.
So have you changed any of your training programs because of this? Are you in the middle of doing that?
We are.
I mean, again, it's all innovation, it's creativity, it's thinking on the fly. How's it going?
We're doing it with management and ownership in terms of offerings, but right now the pause is on the employees, because we have to develop that curriculum, not only internally here locally as a regional organization, but with our training accreditation partners at the National Restaurant Association. This is a really big area that is being discussed and developed, but what I feel very good about is that everyone around the country is ahead of this and thinking about what this next workforce needs to look like and what kind of training will be required. Again, we have to have the willingness and flexibility of the governments around us to be able to be flexible with their current programming, to adapt and adjust to ensure that it's the kind of training that works for an industry that's going to have to hire back differently.
It is going to require a lot of new thinking among governments, because just the regulations can be crushing for people.
Yes.
I remember when I was at Montgomery County, I came across a woman in our parking garage. This is a very sad story. Our parking garage, who was just crying. And I went up and talked and said, what can I help you? What's the problem? And basically she'd been trying to open a restaurant at Tacoma Park, and she was a year late in terms of opening, because every time she came in to get her occupancy permit, there was another hurdle she had to jump. I mean, just was very frustrating. And when we went into Bethesda and redid some of the restaurants in Bethesda, we had to get state law changed to allow restaurants to put tables away from their doors, that the law required them to be physically next to the restaurant, that you didn't want alcohol crossing this sidewalk. So we got the change. So now you can walk between the store and the restaurant, store and the tables. The tables are against the street, which slows traffic down a bit. So it's the perfect way to do it, but we had to jump through hoops to make that happen. So
yeah,
I wish everybody well as we go through. And I hope as you said, I hope they've learned lessons and are much more adaptable to making changes in the future to help businesses succeed, to help restaurants succeed. Are you hearing any from across the country? Are you hearing any other kinds of innovations that have struck you as something worth pursuing?
I mean, I will say, I think everyone in this region should feel very good about how creative and resilient our folks have been here across the region. And again, we've raised Bettina's name like a million times, but because we know she's on this, kudos to her. I mean, we have people and leaders like Bettina who they are planning and thinking and reimagining in ways that nobody across the country is in a position to do. Now, California, because they have, the comforts of some of the predictable weather, although that has changed quite a bit, but and their rollbacks are impacting them significantly, but they have really embraced outdoor space in a fantastic way, but they always had that advantage, which is why I say, as a region who did not necessarily think that way, we're really ahead of the curve. We were ahead of the curve on things like alcohol to go, and really just looking at DC, the local dollars that are going to small business restaurants, a lot of states aren't even getting that. So we should feel good about that piece of it. In terms of the purpose-driven work that has been done, the restaurants that turned their footprints into grocery stores, restaurants that turned their entire operation into, feeding the furloughed employees who they had to let go, but also the 10 neighboring restaurants around them. I mean, this is the kind of purpose-driven leadership that we see here across the region that we don't necessarily see it across the country. I mean, look at who we have Jose Andres. He is our local hero, and he's doing what he did in DC all over this world. So yes, we're seeing some innovation, but I think that we have seen enough of it right here in our region that we're seeing other jurisdictions adopt some of that thinking.
That's great to hear. That is great to hear. We've had a question from Jimmy Williams about during the lull, what can nonprofits do to help your industry while we're sort of getting through the winter, getting through the lull? Anything jump to mind?
So many things. I mean,
besides buying meals.
Besides buying meals, this is what I would say for any nonprofit, honestly, any business, any corporation, any entity that has any kind of budget, whether it's in the giving space or whether it is just operational in nature, there are two areas. One is to really be deliberate and intentional about spend. Everybody has the ability to spend in any possible way. Please choose to spend local, first and foremost. Just let's invest in our local market. So meals, sending meals, holiday team luncheon that's not happening, but you want to send it to your employees. feed them with local restaurant food. That's one. In the giving space, there's going to be, worker relief. We have a worker relief fund, but a lot of people have various worker relief funds. So I'm not pitching REMW Education Foundation versus every other restaurant that may have a worker relief fund. They want to help their people. In March, the biggest issue owners were calling me about was, how do I take care of my people? I have just laid off 92% of my staff. What can I do? What can we do to take care of our people? We're going into the winter months. Many have not been rehired. About 35,000 in DC alone are still unemployed just in our sector. There are various ways you can support worker relief funds to get them meals, to get them provisions, to get them services that are needed now going into the winter, but possibly as we come out of the winter. So remw.org has a lot of the listings of various ways people can support if you want our insight. But I would also encourage you to do the same as you are reaching out to small business owners. They may have the same kind of mechanism in place.
And another question from Carolyn Jepson. While the training is going to be different for restaurant workers, is the skill set required going to be different? And is the profile of the worker going to be different?
So depending on the job and the role, the skill set will be similar, plus 15 additional things that they have to keep in mind.
Okay.
In terms of protocol, health standards, public health. I mean, there's a food handling, alcohol and beverage handling, allergens. Everything will change. Everything will be refined and it will be added to. That's the first part. The second part is that there are going to be a lot of different roles that are needed in our industry. I think many restaurants are going to choose to create their own in-house delivery and takeout models versus counting on third-party delivery platforms, which means that they may be hiring people back to be drivers or to be curbside expediters versus coming in-house to be a server per se. So it will change. And as I talk about, we will look different. All of us, everything will look different. And possibly the scale and size. It is very possible that restaurants will not hire back at the level that they had in place as a workforce initially, because of many reasons, but because roles are changing and consumer trends are changing as well, where the services and needs may not be in-house on premise. Chipotle is a great example, Doug, what you said.
Yeah.
So much of it is being done on your phone and being done online. So what is that? That takes the place of people. And that is just something to keep in mind when we talk about technology.
And again, I don't mean to keep bringing up Bettina. She should have been on this call with us, I guess, this conversation. And we're very grateful she is listening in and watching. But just to give you an idea, she gives a big thank you to you all, to RAMW and to the DC government, because of the alcohol to go. She said day or 2, 3 into the shutdown, they started selling alcohol to go. It was a very quick pivot. They're not a bar business, but alcohol sales do help their bottom line. She said sales percentage from alcohol went from 4.5% of overall to 12 to 13%. So that makes a huge benefit to her. That's great news. So
that's great to hear.
And we have a question or an idea from Robert Harvey. Let me look at this. Why not start marketing chefs from restaurants to catering small gatherings? I think some chefs are doing that.
Yeah.
Start using mall space and squares for dining. I guess the problem with malls is it's still inside. It's still an issue. And I'm not, to be very honest with you, very candid, I'm not ready to go into a restaurant to sit and eat yet. I won't feel comfortable doing that till I get a vaccine. I will go and order out. I will go. I really haven't gone and sat outside, but I would consider that.
Yeah.
But we're doing a lot of takeout with people. So.
Well, that, Doug, so that's a good point. I mean, that when I talk about the biggest issue right now for restaurant operators when surveyed, they said is the obstacles and challenges around consumer confidence to dine inside. That is real. What I will tell you is that, we also, as an organization representing the industry, we do a lot of marketing. We do a lot of marketing programs. And really all of them for the foreseeable future have been very little cost to no cost to the industry because it's a part of our recovery efforts. Like Cocktail Week is a great example. Cocktails to Go, we were able to completely rethink Cocktail Week, where we had amazing virtual programming with different mixologists from the industry making cocktails with an audience that wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to be able to learn how to make these drinks at home. You go buy the ingredients, you go to the restaurant, get the batch cocktails, you get it to go. But the same with indoor, outdoor dining. All of our restaurant week was, whether you're dining in, dining out, or dining at home, it's restaurant week. Go out and get your food, come back home, grab a neighbor, go to your front yard, go to your backyard, but order food from these 200 plus restaurants. So someone asked a question about marketing. All of the marketing that we're doing for the industry has to be tone appropriate, but it's about finding ways to be able to support small businesses in ways that you as a diner or consumer are comfortable.
So I misread part of Robert Harvey's question. He didn't mean malls. He meant the National Mall, all that open space in the middle of DC. And can you talk for just a minute about the outdoor eating now, the tents and the heating units and all that? How's that working? And what are the challenges with that?
Yeah, so the upside is that all the allowances with streeteries and outdoor dining and tenting has been fantastic. What we didn't anticipate, nor did the city, more so than I would say Virginia or Maryland, they have more allowances, is the heating component. So if you have a tent and it is enclosed, or you have 2 or more flaps down, it is almost impossible for you to have to get the approval to heat it. You have to have clearance on the top end, but you also have to have all flaps except one up. All flaps except one up. That's right. Now, if you have an igloo, which a lot of restaurants have these tiny confined individual dining pods that are covered, and I call them igloos. Some are igloos, some are more customized, like huts, little tents where you and your family of 5, you can sit outside in these individualized tents that are sanitized, regularly cleaned. There is an ability for some level of airflow, but you cannot heat it. So the challenge is, again, are you the winter warrior? If you're a winter warrior and you want a BYO blanket and you want to go out there and support the industry, I mean, that is what I do. Part of it is because I have to. I will be the warrior with the blanket dining out with my family, but we have to think about the average person. Are they going to do that when it's cold? Are they going to choose to sit outside? So some of this we can't control. If the fire chief is saying there is no way we are going to allow for heaters in these kind of spaces, it's very hard for me to argue with a fire chief or challenge the Department of Health. These are the 2 areas where if they say no, they say no. But we're trying to figure out and be creative around ways that we can modestly heat these outdoor spaces during the winter months to at least continue this outdoor dining that is allowed, particularly as we go into the holidays and going into inauguration.
Debbie Kaplan just mentioned that she understands in New York, some restaurants are serving meals in empty hotel rooms. They partner with hotels to provide meals. Have we got anything like that going on down here?
I don't know of that going on here. I mean, I think occupancy level is still at it's so marginal at hotels that it's still indoor dining. I mean, it's why do a hotel room versus go to a restaurant? I mean, I
Yeah.
because it's more isolated. But
Perhaps they think, perhaps instead of a tent in the freezing cold, it's a warmer certainly, but a cleaner environment to go into a hotel room, who are cleaning them quite a bit.
yeah, I have not heard of that in DC, but what I have heard, or what we are having conversations around, are ways in which our industries are supporting one another on the F&B side and on the lodging side. How can we come together in a way that works as occupancy level rises?
And we've got another question about, can restaurants become part of hospitals' food supply chain with Sodexo and other, food contract companies? Any way restaurants can partner with them?
Absolutely. There are ways. We've had a group of restaurant operators that have partnered with hospitals in that way, in a less official way. Of course, they do it as they are feeding, you know, healthcare workers and first responders, but in a B2B kind of way as well. As hospitals have had to rethink their F&B, the food and beverage offerings within the hospital, they are looking to partner with area restaurants that have the capacity to be able to do food drops in significant ways.
Kathy, I know I asked this, God, it's probably 8 months ago now, maybe almost 9 months, but any leadership lessons that you've learned over the past several months? Any?
Yes, I mean, so many. I will say that one big lesson I learned very early on is that, having to be incredibly flexible and incredibly patient as a leader, to listen when a community and an industry is in crisis. I hope that I've worked on those two skills: to listen better, to be more patient, to be more still. But I will also say that for everyone, I think it's a big lesson to find ways to still create your community. We are an industry that is a social gathering industry. Our entire industry was built on pulling people together to create experiences for them, celebrate milestones, and bring people together. And for us as an organization, that was our biggest challenge, which is somewhat why I felt it was critical to do this daily communication every other day now to our industry, where I'm still finding a way to humanize all of what is being done while we cannot physically be together. But it really meant that I had to think outside the box. And, I think that there are some great lessons to be learned as an organization, as we think about work-life balance, as we think about, why we are doing what we're doing. And if we are not doing what brings us joy, this has probably been a time where a lot of people have stepped back to think about, what is it that brings me joy? And do I want to continue doing it in a way where I can help people, I can help a community, I can provide a service and experience to a community. So I have learned so much, Doug. I have also learned so much from so many, whether it's my own immediate team or whether it's from leaders and owners like Bettina, who are so willing to stretch themselves and reimagine. It's helped me personally and it's helped me professionally. So I hope that a lot of these gleanings will be portable and take me and us forward. And I hope to God we don't have selective amnesia when we come out of this, where we really remember all of the adversity we were in and come through to really be better and bolder and stronger as a community.
And besides Charlotte Reed, who was a star, by the way, in our LGW channel yesterday, any LGW members like Bettina who you've reached out to, have reached out to you during these difficult months?
Oh, so many. Charlotte Reed always. Listen, Mayor Bowser regularly, Neil Albert often, Kenyon McDuffie almost every day, Corey Griffin, so many, Doug, you, me, Mimi Moses. I mean, there's so many people that are supportive and also ask how they can be supportive of anything and everything. And I'm missing so many people. David Gordetsky, I will just do one plug. If people can do this, it's great. Every Wednesday in my neighborhood, I send out an email and I ask my neighbors, we're going to order from this restaurant today. I'm going to go pick up, load up the car. Everyone pick up your food from the front of my yard at 6:45. We pick a different small business. Bettina, you're next. And it avoids any delivery cost for the restaurant operator, but it also is a small way. I call it support small in a big way. Everybody should be doing this. Everybody should do it and be an ambassador in their own neighborhood, whether it's your condo building, whether it's your apartment building, whether it's 5 neighbors, 10 neighbors. But it is a way to support small in a big way. And David Gordetsky is in my front lawn, picking up his food every couple weeks. And that is his way of supporting in the neighborhood. I have to pull Mary Abijay into that as well.
That's great, Kathy. Kathy, I want to thank you so much for this. It's always wonderful to talk with you. I'm sorry we're not doing this in person. I really am waiting for the day when you and I can get together in person again. But you're the best. We went first with you for a reason, and you're the first repeat customer we have for the same reason. So you give us great information. Can't thank you enough for this. And let me just leave you with the final word.
Well, I adore you, Doug. I do miss so many of us being able to be together. I'm such an LGW proud advocate, and I feel really fortunate that I have this immediate community that I can go to for support and for insight and guidance and leadership, and really has been a part of my own personal and professional scaffolding to try to get through this time, but really the last 30 years being in the city. I hope to see all of you soon. And at a minimum, please support small, spend locally, and send a meal to someone. If you don't feel comfortable going out to eat, send a meal to a friend. It will go a long way, and it does make a difference. Every dollar does.
Kathy, thank you so much. What a great conversation. It's tremendous.
Thanks, Doug.
And I want to thank PNC for their sponsorship again. I want to encourage you all to please join us for future conversations that we've got coming up. And have a great holiday, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Kathy.
Bye, Doug. Bye, everyone.